folks, and thanks to those who are joining us for the first time. Nice to see a few more students on the call as well today. I thought it might be good to do a brief summary of yesterday, particularly for Robert and Rosemary's benefit. I think most people know each other on the call, but maybe we'll just go over to Rosemary and Robert and ask you to introduce yourselves briefly. And if there's anybody else who wasn't here yesterday, if you could do the same, that would be great. So is it Robert and Rosemary?
Right. Yes, good afternoon. I'm just hearing on my own. I'm using Rosemary's iPad, but I'm here on my own at the moment. But as you may have gathered, we were on the staff at Atlantic College back in the early 70s. And I've been in touch with Graham and other people, John Devonshire and Graham, and a whole range of colleagues down the years, Andrew McLehose and so on. And I've had a long-standing introduction. And Alan Hall is another of my friends and colleagues going down the years. And we've been in touch with Atlantic College really ever since we so-called left. We never really left in that sense, but anyway, we've had these long-standing connections. And one of them was that, particularly through the valley and the care you're taking of the valley and the restoration of the vinery and so on. And Graham can tell you more about that, but that was one of my connections. The other one was with Alan Hall, and I ran the geography and taught economics. And with Alan Hall, we started the environmental studies course when the IB began, which is now, of course, the environmental systems course. But I've got the original documents here, actually, and I've been, over my teaching career, involved in environmental matters, as I've been teaching geography and history and economics on other occasions. And I've been involved with the Wildlife Trust and other such organisations up this way. But that's enough probably for me for the moment, anyway.
Well, it's
thanks
with
so
us.
much. Katie, go on.
No, I just wanted to say, great to have you with us. It's really exciting having all these different voices that we haven't heard from before, and particularly what's sort of interesting is yesterday. I know Sean was going to do a summary, but yesterday we heard some really inspiring insights from people who are either working within the UWC community on community agriculture projects or on their own projects out, beyond the UWC movement. But it was also really, really lovely to hear from people like yourself, from the UWC Atlantic College past, saying actually that, this is not a new thing. We've been doing this for years, and over the years, it kind of waxes and wanes a little bit, but actually there's a huge amount to build on. And so that we don't need to feel like, we're sort of somehow scrabbling around starting from scratch, but that actually just there's a huge amount that is totally embedded and ongoing, which is actually really, really heartening, because it means that now we can, really push boundaries rather than sort of doing all the groundwork, which it feels like actually Graham and Sam and others are absolutely on top of. So it's just really, really lovely to have those sort of voices from the past as well. Anyway, I'll mute myself.
Absolutely. And it just shows you how sustainability is part of the fabric of the place. And so I guess this is about, as Katie's saying, finding new ways of reinvigorating our commitment to that and put it into practice for a new way of learning. Robert, I'm the Director of Learning Innovation at the college, and I've been in post this year, and we've been looking at different ways of students learning that is more mission related and mission aligned. So that's part of the background of these calls. We'll hear in a few moments from Graham about the Valley, which is still the main focus of students' attention in terms of the work that they do on campus in relation to food production. Yesterday, just by way of a very brief summary, but most people were on that call, we heard about 4 really good examples of engagements between young people and communities around the land. We heard from Alice Holden, who farms 1.5 hectares in London, in Dagenham, on a community growing project. And what I took from that was how inventive she is in drawing in the community and also what a challenge it can be to work with the land that you're given, and all the work that she had to do and her community had to do to make that land rich and fertile. We heard from Richard Dunn and his project in a primary school in southeast London, which is Ashfield Primary School, which integrated growing right into the curriculum and also had a set of principles for learning that went alongside that and really got the students really engaged in all aspects of growing and what that means in terms of the curriculum, in terms of science, and in terms of values and ethics and engagement. And we heard from from two examples of UWC settings. Firstly, in Mahindra United World College in India, where Ashwin talked us through the growing project that they had. And that was quite extensive, involving lots of students. Every student on campus was involved in it in some way. And what I think was one of the key features of that was how it brought the community together and how it really served as a focal point for the building of culture around sustainable thoughts and actions on the campus. And that was really lovely. And then we heard from Cami, who talked us through some of the projects that she was involved with in Nova Scotia. And Cami has been involved as a Pearson graduate in galvanising the community in Pearson. And I think you can read the notes, everyone can read the notes from that that Ed has shared, but there are certainly some themes that come through it. And those themes of engaging the whole community, I think, was really important. The other theme is one that Katie put on the table right at the beginning about reciprocity and how we look at this as an ecosystem in itself in terms of the whole organisation and the whole culture of the college, and how we're really driven by our relationships with ourselves, our land, and each other in order to make that happen. So I don't really want to go on much further than that, but I just wanted to share a quote with people just to set us off on today's conversations. And if I can just share my screen for a second, are people seeing that? We started talking about sunflowers yesterday and how they turn to the sun and how that gives us some kind of life-giving energy. And I came across this lovely quote from Rabbi Hillel the other day, in which I think speaks to the reciprocity that Katie's encouraging us to think about as one of the key principles underlying this work together. And that's, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm not for others, what am I? And if not now, when? And I think that is a nice piece of encourages us kind of to be really reflective, which we're doing here really, not just on what's happened in the past in terms of the valley and the lands and how we can engage the whole community in learning through it, but also the wider ecosystem of education and how we can use these principles and practices we're talking about today in order to invigorate the educational process as well. So we've got quite a lot to do, a lot on the agenda today, and I wanted to open it up really maybe for some reflections first on yesterday, before we get on to thinking about those principles and questions that we framed at the end of yesterday's session, which we've put here. Would anybody like to sort of comment on yesterday or the process of today, and what we might need to cover in the light of what we thought about yesterday?
I think, yeah, just to follow on, Sean, thanks for the summary. I just wanted to, again, just make everyone aware that we've had that sort of insight session where we were hearing really inspiring stories yesterday. Today is about, we've called it the Ethos session, so it's about sort of setting principles about how we think this could become embedded in college culture. And then the next session, the sort of action session, is where we, talk about how do we actually put this into process in a very, tangible, practical way. So just to kind of, if you're thinking, why aren't we talking about what we're actually going to do or something like that, that's why, because we're just trying to make sure we can focus enough time and energy and thought on really looking at today, looking at the kind of ethos and the principles by which we're working. And just to follow on from what Sean was saying, I think what I found really inspiring yesterday was that there was such a great balance of, Cami and Alice really talking about how it's actually viable, the value that that they're creating is, you know, really tangible. It's a business, it works, it's viable, it does something, that it produces something that is valuable in so many ways. It's not just a sort of nice community project sort of thing. It's actually really useful and practical. And then from, you know, from Ashwin and Richard talking, as Sean said, you know, particularly about how it's brought communities together. Actually, all of the examples show all of those things, but it's just really, really lovely to have that sense of balance, that you can do both. It can be this learning experience and a richly gathering community nurturing experience, and be really, really practically viable and useful. Anyway.
Brilliant. Absolutely. So I think it'd be a good place to start, as we said we would yesterday, is to hand it over to Graham, maybe to introduce your film, Graham, which brings us up, which will help to give everybody an insight of what is happening in that part of the campus in the valley that's so precious to us right now. Graham?
Yeah, hello everybody. The film doesn't need much introduction. I'm no film star. It's rather wooden and homespun. But it does give you a kind of sit rep. It takes you up to date with what's been going on down in the valley, particularly over the last 6 weeks. And I hope that it generates a number of questions. How do we proceed from here? Sean rightly used the word cyclical in the slide that he's just shown us. And that's the cycle is something that we don't seem to be able to complete because of the summer period. If you've got 3/4 of a wheel, you haven't got a wheel. So how we complete the cycle and then how we make the cycle sustainable seem to be questions that arise as far as I'm concerned. But I think we should probably just watch this film and comment on it afterwards. Okay.
Thank you, Graham. I'll share my screen and try to play the recording now. Can you all see the video?
Yeah,
yeah,
Excellent.
Good afternoon and welcome to St. Donat's on the Welsh Riviera, in particular to UWC Atlantic and to the Kitchen Garden, otherwise known as the Valley. My name's Graham Smith. I'm a teacher here for about the last 10 years, together with students and colleagues. I've been trying to turn this area into something more productive, and this afternoon I'm going to give you a quick update, quick tour. So the first thing that we can see over to my right is what we call a biodiversity area. We leave this area untouched. You can see a lot of hogweed and buttercups and nettles and some red campion and some gnarls, old apple trees. But if you go foraging in there, I'm sure you'll find a great deal more of interest. We leave it untouched, as I've said. Over here to my left, you can see an area that needs some development. We've got an outdoor area where students can congregate. We've got a cob oven, a shelter built by students during Project Week some years ago. And behind that cob oven, we've got a wood store. It would be very nice to see this area turned into a space where design projects could be realized and students make themselves at home, meet, share a fire, and share their projects here. We're now standing beside our orchard, an area where we have apple trees, pears, plums, a few green gages. It's an area that needs quite a lot of maintenance. And I'm now going to take you to the main growing area. I'm going to show you the polytunnel the old greenhouse, herb garden, and an area where we have raspberry canes. What I'm about to show you has been achieved over about the last 6 weeks during lockdown by the staff of the college, who've come down here on a very regular basis to offer their time and their labour most afternoons. I would like to stress that this project really got going about 10 years ago, and it did so with the support of 3 people whose names I'd like to mention in particular. John Walmsley, a former principal, developed a personal interest in this project and saw that it was financially supported. So I'd like to say thank you to John for his efforts. Bob Williams also supported the refurbishment of the vinery we will be visiting in a moment. He provided us with some grapes and some financial support for that. And Alice Holden, a former student of the college, helped us to buy the polytunnel that we're about to have a look inside for a very reasonable price about 10 years ago. Alice has also offered her advice and support unstintingly over the last 10 years. So we're now going to have a quick look inside the tunnel. As you can see, it's full of tomato plants. We also have some peppers, some radishes, some parsley. I'm going to put some aubergines and melons in here as a bit of an experiment. We'd like to see how they get on. I'm now going to walk you through the main outdoor growing area. It's about 50 yards in length, it's about 15 yards wide, and I'm going to walk down a path that the students began constructing about a year ago, and simply talk you through the crops that we have here. So the first thing that we have here, we have garlic. We also have started a few nasturtiums. Moving on, we've got spring onions, chard, peas and mange too, leaf beet, purple sprouting broccoli, more chard, and then we've got some rows of potatoes. There are 2 rows in between the 3 that you can see. They'll be coming up in due course. Very pale. Various types of beans, broad beans, runner beans, French beans, so on. Then we have some carrots. You can't see them yet. They'll be coming up soon, I hope. Turnip, kohlrabi, and swede. And in the final part of the main bed, we have courgettes. They're struggling a little bit. I think they were probably put out a bit too early, and the cold nights earlier in May may well have affected them, but I think they'll pull through. If we move on, you can see that we've cultivated a second bed here. It's very stony, as you can probably see. There's also a lot of couch grass in it, but we've planted it up with sweet corn and pumpkins. We've enriched the earth with some horse manure, and both of those plants seem to like it here. We started work on the main bed by building raised beds and filling them with horse manure. Over a period of time, we took the raised beds away. We filled the areas between them with more horse manure to enrich the soil. So what we're left with are just a few raised beds in front of the vinery. And in these beds, we have some more broad beans, some sprout, a few more courgettes, and then 3 beds of rhubarb that we rescued from the second outdoor bed here. They seem to like the damp conditions here, although we haven't had much rain here for about 2 weeks. So they're growing only slowly. I'm now going to show you the refurbished vinery. As I said, Bob Williams helped us, and we were able to cover it. It's now full of a range of produce. We can see, if we look in through the window, we've got salad, we've got spinach, we've got celery, we've got purslane at the far end, we've got mustard, whole range of different salads, including some lettuce that was sown down at growing communities in Dagenham. A group of students travelled down to Dagenham during Project Week to work with Alice Holden, and while they were there, they sowed lettuce and other crops, brought them back, and you can see them growing in here alongside the vines. They're Muscat of Alexandria grapevines. There's also a couple of black Hamburg grapevines in there. We also have against the back wall apricots, nectarine, peach tree, a couple of lemon trees, and a kiwi fruit. So that's our vinery. I'm now standing at the far end of the vinery. This is the way it used to look before we refurbished it. I'm also standing in the middle of a new project. This is a herb garden. It's about 4 months since this herb garden was established. That also happened during Project Week. A group of students and staff brought in compost and set out the plants that you can see here, along with the explanatory labels. I'm now standing in front of the old greenhouse. Many of you will remember it. We filled this with tomatoes and cucumbers. There's also some self-seeding rockets here. And at the far end, you can see an area that's been given over to St. Donat's nursery so that the children can come down here and enjoy being outside. And they can also plant things and get some sort of experience of nature. Behind the greenhouse, we have an area where we're cultivating raspberries. So we've got some rows of raspberry canes here. Staff rescued this area a few weeks ago, and I'm hopeful that we'll get a reasonable harvest. Against the side wall, you can see that we've trained 3 peach trees. One of those trees is certainly going to produce a very good harvest this summer. Now standing at the nursery end of the greenhouse, where you can see a couple of outdoor beds that have been cultivated by the children. Potatoes here, we've got some leeks and we've got some rhubarb. Inside they've also got some raspberries and some canes where they wanted to plant beans. Unfortunately, the children can't be here at the moment because of lockdown. But we're keeping an eye on their produce, and we hope that they'll be back before too long so that they can enjoy the fruits of their labours. Right, the last thing that I want to do is talk a little bit about the soil here in the valley. As you can see, this is soil that's not been treated in any way. This is the original soil. What's happened here is that weeds have been removed. You can see that it's a very stony soil, and once the stones have been removed, as they have to some extent in this patch here, what you're left with is a rather coarse textured clay. You've got these heavy clods of clay, and this soil needs enriching. So if we move a little bit further down the bed, you can see that we've started to do that here by putting some horse manure on here. That needs spreading out, and that's what we're hoping to do here over the course of the next week or so. This end of this bed, which lies alongside the greenhouse, this end here has been treated, and what we have here is actually rather good quality soil. It's been de-stoned. It's had several years worth of horse manure placed on top of it. We've practiced no dig at this end of the bed, and I think this bed is now ready for strawberries, which we're hoping to put in here over the next few days. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick tour of the valley down in St. Donat's, and with that, I bid you farewell.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Graham, for putting that together. It just gives us a really vivid insight into what's going on there. The only bit you missed, which I thought would be your favourite bit as a TOK teacher, is that nice pretentious bit in the corner with the Voltaire quote. You know, was it "Il faut cultiver notre jardin"? I had to write it down. There you
go. As French goes, that's not a very pretentious sentence, Sean. And yeah. It says it all.
You're aiming something for something a bit more highbrow.
Not at all. I think it says it all, very simply in a single sentence.
Lovely. Could be a motto for this whole project, couldn't it?
Well,
are there any comments leading on from that before we break into groups and start to address some of the questions for today?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, what an amazing job. It's so transformed, Graham, from last year when Katie and I were there. I mean, what a fantastic place the valley is in, right? And I can't remember it ever looking so good on various trips back.
But it might be square 98, Jack. We roll a 1, we land on the big snake on square 99, and by the time late August comes around, we might be back on square 6 or wherever the tail of that snake is. That's the concern that I have.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Graham. I think that's exactly what we want to talk about, really, that how we can see that, one, that there's huge commitment from people, there's huge amounts going on, but it seems really, really difficult is to make it consistent, and not just make it consistent within the people who are doing it, but how does it become properly embedded? And that's really in the whole college culture, that somehow everybody in the college is taking part in it on some level, and so it's really good that you've said that, because that's really the purpose of today, is leading on from all of the conversations we had yesterday. The key question really was, so we're all sitting around agreeing that all of this is important and that we want to get back to the land and all of those sorts of things, but how do we embed it? How do we make it stick so that we're not going to slide down the snake in 2 days' time or something? So yeah, Sean, do you want to take over?
Sure, yeah, and I think that leads us nicely on, Katie, doesn't it, to this first question that we're going to go into breakout rooms to consider, and that's what seems to be the key ingredients we're looking for, which is extending the metaphor slightly. What are the kind of, what do we need to put in to the pot of this wonderful sustainability soup that we're making? So the things that came up yesterday was sustainability, ritual, cycle, celebration, something that's participatory, something that's cyclical. What would we add? What would we take away for that, from that? And maybe if we have 10 or 15 minutes on this, and I think it might be a good idea to consider these separately so that we can maybe have a blast for 10 minutes or so of thinking in small groups, and then bring it back to decide on something more concrete, and then we can do the other 2 rounds if everyone's happy with that process.
In terms of how is sustainability embedded in the college at the moment, just to give us a quick framing, so that
I think in particular there's been sort of slightly fleeting mention of the last program, and I think for all of us coming into this, yeah, if you can just paint a picture of what are the current mechanisms for talking about, you know, these kind of issues as part of the curriculum or of college life in service or anything else.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Mickey's on the call actually. Mickey, would you like to explain something about what the ground that's been covered on last and or Ed? I mean, I'm happy to do it if you're not there.
I can't see Mickey. Has she gone?
Mickey, yeah, she was on the call.
Yes, she must have left the call.
Yeah. Ed, would you like to just people are probably sick of hearing my voice, just to broaden it out a little bit? Would you like to sort of just say something about your intentions for last, maybe for next year?
Well, I've been thinking quite a lot about it. For a while, we felt that. Sorry, I should probably turn my video on. For a while, we felt that the title of last perhaps is not quite right, and I'm thinking very much. I've come across Simone Weil's book about uprootedness recently, and so I'm wondering about some title for the course to do with rooting, basically thinking about this course as a way of rerouting ourselves in the land. I've been thinking a lot in the past few days about almanacs and about strategies that I can take to help the students put down roots during their time at the college, because I feel that this period, it's been the first time that I've actually, you know, for my first 2 years at the college, I've never really looked around. Everything is so busy, so hectic, that it's the first time I've sat and watched spring out of my window. So I've been thinking about lots of things that I'm going to do with these students to try and get them rooted here in the land, you know, particularly with an emphasis probably on biodiversity. Also natural cycles. I've been wondering whether we might sleep outside every full moon as a way of kind of, in the valley probably, as a way of like bringing ourselves into connection with these cycles that we're so distanced from because of electric light and, you know, TOK deadlines and all of that. If you asked any student what phase of the moon it was, probably wouldn't know. If you asked them to point east or west, a lot of the students would struggle. So I'm thinking about a course basically that's going to bring us back in contact with the land. We'll go caving, we'll study the stars one evening perhaps, and probably a lot of drawing and writing work to do with all of that. So that's one tiny microcosm of this new Changemaker curriculum. The question more broadly about the place of sustainability in the college, I'm not sure I'd really like to answer that question very much, because I feel personally that we talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. But I also don't want to be undermining the college in that way. But I think we have got a really serious issue on our hands. You know, if you think in terms of the college's heating system and heating this 12th century castle, it's a disaster, really. You know, we're leaking heat all over the place. And I think it's something the college really needs to think about very carefully. But I don't want to rock the boat too much as a current employee.
Thanks, Ed. I think just to add to that, I guess I've got a fairly unique insight of having taught here nearly 20 years ago, then coming back at the beginning of this year. And one of the big changes I noticed was the quality of the food in the canteen, and how that attends to the wider sort of principles that the college is about to a greater extent. I mean, not to the extent maybe that everybody would like, but certainly to a greater extent. There's a great potential in that, and a great potential in the relationship between the canteen and the land around us. So I think that's, you know, that's a source of potential as well as a source of potential frustration. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to say much more in terms of the conflicts that happen in big organisations, particularly that are financially challenged by the COVID crisis. I think, you know, that's going to lead to some interesting conversations. But the best way to have those conversations is to have an appetite for a collective discussion around them, and that's part of the work here, isn't it? It's to get people informed and able to make cases. So. Is that enough of a framing, Jack, do you think? Because we could go into it in a lot more detail, but I felt yesterday was quite good in terms of the broad principles. Katie?
I just wanted to ask just a clarification question to Ed. Was one of the things that I was just wondering was all of the things that you're describing as plans, you know, sleeping outside, and I think sounds brilliant. Are these things that you're proposing for the whole college community, or is this a group of students who happen to choose to be part of a particular activity or service, or choose a particular subject? How does it work? Are you proposing this as something that is college-wide?
Currently, that is the proposal for the group of 15 students piloting the last course next year. I guess the hope would be to extend it more widely, and that is obviously something that I'd like to do with all students, but at the moment it's pretty slim.
And I think just the other thing I wanted to ask was, not really a question, but going back to your point of, you know, you don't want to say too much, don't want to be undermining. I think that the whole purpose of this Alumni Project Week is that we're kind of family. We're all in it because we care about it, and because we fundamentally believe that something really good can happen out of this. So I think that everybody talking about everything to do with the college should be taken in the spirit of it being constructive. So I think that we should really make sure that if those are the things you're thinking, you're saying them, because that's kind of why we're here, because we're all recognizing that the college could do better on that. So I think we should just be feeling pretty free to talk about that stuff, because that's the purpose of it.
Can I just add to what Katie was saying there? I think that there should be a non-negotiable element to the service programme, which requires that at some stage during their 2-year experience, all students have to get their hands dirty and engage with what somebody is calling ecological literacy on the chat here. I put proposals forward. I've talked to Sam a bit about this, but I really do think that just as students have to take mathematics as part of the IB diploma, that's non-negotiable. They can determine the level at which they take mathematics. So they really should be made to participate in this dimension of the service programme at some stage during their 2 years at the college.
Great. Wonderful. That's a really good starting point. I think a really good platform.
I mean, Sean, is there the potential to do that, to have that sort of college-wide focus? And
I think there is. I think we've come into this with a few things in mind, haven't we? Without prejudging kind of what Saturday's session might bring, but there seems to be an appetite developing for everybody to be involved in the land in some way. And there seems to be, you know, with Ed's involvement, you know, a way of grounding that last course as a kind of a deep engagement in terms of the relationship that we have as humans with the land, and that those things can coexist. And let's see what comes out of Friday and Saturday. And then I think Saturday's session is about
before we go into the discussion.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Sean. I was just wondering, before we go into the discussion, it would be really, really useful to get either Sean or other members of staff or students to describe what you think at the moment the appetite within the college community is for, you know, for this kind of thing. Because in terms of what we end up proposing or, you know, thinking about as being, you know, a viable way to get this going, it's sort of useful for us to get a sense of how ambitious or how, you know, what doors are we pushing against, or is the door wide open? You know, just give us a sense of, you know,
yeah, okay. Can I
how
pass
tentative or bold we should be.
Yeah, so sorry to because it's so difficult to know when people have finished speaking on Zoom. So can I pass that over to Sam, Kate? Because that might be helpful from Sam's position as curating the service and activity programme. I'm sure you've got a perspective on that, Sam.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the one thing I've really learned working in the Valley this summer is just how much workforce is needed down there to maintain the type of the type of crops and the work that we've done so far. We're going to need a lot of students down there very regularly. I agree with Graham that it would be really good if this was part of our college ethos, and therefore we would have every student being involved in the Valley in some way. I'm hesitant to make any commitment to that at the moment, purely because we're still at the very early stages of next year's co-curricular activities. We've got our student committee will be appointed over this weekend, and then we'll be looking forward to what we can do next year. But I do think that we have a real opportunity now with what's happened in the world to realign ourselves with what Cato was saying yesterday, to really, in my mind, I've got sort of 3 circles, and the inner circle is about reconnecting as a community to look after our land and to look after each other before we then start looking outwards again into our local community and our wider community. We still do have real commitments to our wider community in some of the residential homes and schools that we go into, and we obviously want to be spending time communicating with them online. There's also people doing a lot of work regarding the seafront and getting students back out on the water, and that's another area that people are very, very passionate about. So I don't feel like I could make a commitment to say that every student will get their hands dirty in the Valley, but I really do feel that we can definitely make a commitment to have more students in the Valley, and I really want to see staff in the Valley who are passionate and knowledgeable to guide the students. And again, I know I mentioned yesterday, so for those people who've already been on the call, I feel really strongly that this has to be part of a cycle as well, in terms of the students seeing the end result of what they're doing, so they see the benefit. And that to be ecological, and if we can make it financially sustainable, I'm not talking about making a profit, but just making it financially sustainable, then that's also what I'd like to see. And we, this is Karim, we piloted chicken service as well. So I run chicken service where the students come every week for some learning, but they come independently to do their own tasks over the course of the week. Sometimes that's at 7 in the morning. And we then sell the eggs to the students and the staff, and that has become financially sustainable. And if we could do that with the Valley as well, I think that would be great.
Lovely, thanks. That's I think that really brings people up to speed with current thinking and will help to frame these conversations. Suggestion.
Sean?
Yes.
Quick question. I sometimes get the sense that there may be more enthusiasm for these initiatives among the staff and among our generation than among the students. So I'd just like to hear a few student comments on this, actually.
Yeah.
If anybody out there is willing to comment. Karim's put an interesting comment on the chat. I'm just wondering if anybody wants to sort of add to that.
Hello?
No.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, so basically what I've noticed is last year you've had a group of students who were very passionate about sustainability and looking after the Valley, but it wasn't a majority and the Valley was kind of neglected. And we have this council called SUSCO, which stands for Sustainability Council, and we've been trying to get more people to come, but it's been really difficult for some reason. And I think that there is this stigma around sustainability still at the college, maybe, that prevents people from joining. And I just hope that by like hyping up sustainability or like the valley and making it more integrated into like college life, and maybe making it mandatory. So maybe saying, okay, let's do it by house. So every week another house takes care of the valley, and kind of make a system like that, where we kind of introduce the valley and sustainability to people who aren't maybe as comfortable with it, and kind of break down that stigma. And I hope that that will help, because I mean, in Graham's video, I saw the valley and I just didn't recognize it. Like, it is so much different from when we left it, because it was completely neglected, which is just such a shame.
Thank you, Kato. That's really helpful. Really helpful.
Can I just, sorry, can I just say something?
Yes, please,
Sean,
Carissa.
sorry? Hi
Yeah.
there, I'm Carissa. I'm quite new to the college. I'm the individual giving manager. Thank you for organising this webinar and Alumni Project Week. I can't believe the video is fascinating. Being new to the college, haven't also myself yet ventured that way into the valley, and it looks absolutely amazing. I actually have a little allotment plot in Lantwit, and it's very small. But I guess sort of seeing the sort of size of the sort of the space there at the college, I realised, yeah, definitely the maintenance that's needed. I mean, at the moment, I'm having to go every day to water plants and veggies, and it's a big job. And I think it's a really exciting project. And I just wanted to say that I wonder if we sort of, as well, I don't know if this has been done, I'm sure it has, but asking sort of students, what is it that they would like from this sort of project, as it were? And it may be that maybe sort of we've talked about sort of seeing an end result as well, and sort of really seeing the sort of completing the cycle. So I wonder if this sort of there's as part of the strategy, there's a certain time of the year where the students then use the produce that they're growing, and they prepare food in their houses to create food. So they really sort of see the sort of importance and sort of with it. But anyway, lots of ideas. But I just wanted to say that because I'm actually really passionate about this. I didn't realise so much until now. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Carissa. Thank you. And I think what you're saying there about the centrality of students is key. It's key to the to the whole sustainability of it, really. Say that again, Graham.
Sorry, Sean. Can I add a proviso? And it's this. I've agreed with everything that's been said yesterday and throughout most of today's meeting. And I do agree that the students should be central. But my proviso is this. There has in the past been an expectation on the part of students that they're somehow entitled to see an end product. And I think that's a slightly unrealistic expectation given what we're trying to do, and that there's an important element of humility in recognizing that you are participating in a cycle that is bigger than you are and that goes on longer than the 2 years that you spend at the college. I remember once planting the pear trees that are now trained along the wall down there, and the students, when we were planting them, asked me, well, are we going to see fruit off these trees? To which my answer was, well, no, of course not, but you're going to come back in 10 years, I hope, and then you will see that you participated in something that has literally borne fruit, but it's done so for the benefit of others. And getting them to recognize that is, I think, extremely important. So yes, some of them should be involved in an end product, but the others should also recognize that they participated in bringing something through to a position in which an end product was possible.
Lovely.
And I haven't said anything yet, but I just wanted to jump in and think about a broader objective. And it seems like the Valley right now I don't understand, I don't think the point of the Valley and the labors that have gone into it. And is there an intention or a desire to feed that food, for example, into the kitchen, or what is the objective of the current production, other than production for production's sake, which of course is a very meaningful endeavor, but does it have an overarching meaning or purpose within the context of the college, or is it an undertaking of passion at this current point?
Can I answer that from a personal point of view, Yuli? Oh, sorry, Yule.
No worries.
Sorry, when I started getting involved in this about 10 years ago, I asked myself 3 questions. Question 1 is this work educationally valuable? And my answer was yes. Question 2, is it educationally valuable, and does it produce food that people can eat? And my answer was yes. And the third question was, is it educationally valuable? Does it provide food that people can eat? And does it do so on a reliable and consistent basis so that the college could rely upon that food source? And my answer to that third question was no. So I think the first question, it's educationally valuable. The second one, it provides food, and that can now find its way into the college shop. I think that's a great possibility that we should be pursuing. But in order to achieve the third objective, there needs to be management buy-in. That was something that Richard said in the email that he sent round to people earlier. And yesterday he said something very important, which is that if you're going to do this, you need to employ a vegetable gardener. So to reach the third of those things, you need to do that.
Yeah, so I think that's what completely jumps to mind right away is until you start bringing the food into the cafeteria, the meaning of the objective is kind of existential. Like and it will be hard for students to grapple with the pear that they can't eat until 10 years from now. But if the production is directly feeding onto their plates, then it's a completely different paradigm, or at least that's what I would argue.
Yeah, can I also just add to that I think it's sort of more than just seeing what comes out at the end. I think it's about positioning itself as essential, not just useful, but essential. You know, things only get, you know, when times are hard financially, which they pretty much always are, things only get resourced and appreciated really when they're repositioned as being absolutely central. Like, we can't do without them. And so I wonder whether, as a group now, you know, as part of this series of talks that we're having, that we almost kind of really have to consider, how do we reposition this work that's going on to make it essential to the college? What would we have to do? What would have to change for it to be something that the college really relied on? It had to produce, it just had to happen. And I think that would change maybe the scale of it, it would change the participation in it, it would change the way it was resourced. And it feels like that's a key question. And the second thing was, I wanted to say was that I think, you know, Sam said, oh, you know, it'd be difficult to commit to this because, well, there's so many other things that are at the forefront, and you need to ask students what they want to do, and, you know, all of these sorts of things. But I feel that that's always going to be the case, right? You know, there's always going to be tugs on time and on interest. But I think one of the really powerful things about what you just posted, the concept of ecological literacy, is that actually it's very broad. This is not just about the valley, as we talked about yesterday. The idea that there's chicken service, that, you know, there's looking at the seafront and engaging with the sea in a more active way. All of that can be done through a lens of ecological literacy. There's such a broad range of things that can actually be encompassed within that concept. And I think if we broadened it out so it wasn't just talking about the valley, actually it would be really quite easy, or easier than we think potentially, to make this something that actually all students, all staff, the whole community could find a way into maybe through the valley, maybe through chickens, maybe through the seafront, maybe through, you know, energy production, all kinds of ways. And I think that concept of ecological literacy is really powerful because it's so broad.
That's great in terms of stimulating our thinking. Can I ask a question of process? The conversation has been so rich. People want to come in, and we were going to go into breakout groups and then come back. How do people want to carry on with this? I mean, do we want to split off and then come back and share ideas, or is this too valuable a thread to give up on? Katie, what's your view?
I mean, I think that the particularly the sort of round, I think we've talked about round 1 and 2, and the idea that so I'm just looking at your slide on the screen.
Yeah,
I think we've all sort of established and bought into the idea, I think, that it being really financially sustainable and ecologically sustainable, having that coming together of ritual, being participatory, and having that that visible cycle. I think we've all kind of bought into that idea as a sort of concept that we all agree with. But I do think we should really, really specifically address, maybe in 2 groups or maybe just sort of facilitate a discussion now. I don't really mind which. That issue of how does it become embedded? You know, is it by having it as part of the curriculum? Is it by having sort of regular rituals that everybody is involved with? Is it by it just becoming very visible? You know, there's a whole load of ways in which it could happen. Is it by having particular staff that are permanently employed, so it drives it forward? You know, all of those things. And the third question that we've got down there is, and I think this is a really key, I wrote this question just because I think it's really important to look at the sort of corollary. You know, what happens if we don't do any of this? Because as we said yesterday, you know, at Atlantic College, the campus that we have there is so large, it's so special, it's so rich. There is, you know, if we can't do it at Atlantic College, where can you do it? There's no, it just feels to me like there's no excuse. You know, if we are an educational establishment living in a time of climate crisis on an incredibly fertile, sizable piece of land, I think questions will be asked through, you know, future history. Why on earth was this not happening in a place that considered itself as at the forefront? So I feel like that's a really important thing to sort of put down on paper in a way. What happens if we don't do any of this? Because that has to form a kind of argument that we go out and talk to people about. So maybe we should, I don't know, Sean, how were you thinking that we might split up, you know, literally what's the mechanism of splitting into groups to talk about these things?
Magda was going to put us into breakout rooms or
we stay together. I mean, maybe we're not that many.
Or we can stay together. Yeah, we've got about 25 minutes. I mean, the benefit of going into breakout rooms is that people who haven't necessarily had a chance to speak yet might be able to contribute and then come back. So, Magda, maybe it might be good to do 15 minutes in a breakout room to address those specific questions, Katie. Then have 10 minutes in breakout rooms, and then that might punctuate our thinking as well, which would be nice. So, Sophia?
Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm not opening my video camera, but my Wi-Fi is really bad, so sometimes it's going to cut. So I'm a student at AC in second year, and I'm also part of LAS. So what I've seen this year, throughout the year, people who were part of the CAS working in the valley, they were coming back and say, oh no, this is so hard, and working in the valley was one of my last choices, or I haven't even chosen that activity. Why they gave me that? It's really, nobody really, I didn't hear anyone really enthusiastic about these cuts or doing it. But another thing that I don't know, someone was mentioning before, for example, LAS was completely student-led, and it right now we are the fourth generation working on it. So the previous generation didn't see any results at all, okay? So as we are gonna start working in the Valley, we're not gonna see the results right now. But the fact that our second years were really enthusiastic and was kind of like passed down selections, made also like people they really wanted to do the activity. So one thing is like when you start from the point that you are going to bring an active help, like real help, that you know that you are building up something, even if you don't see the results, but this is also told by other students, other your co-years. And another thing is when it's imposed by, I don't know, by staff, or you have to do this and you have to do this. Why, if you know that you're kind of building up something that it's a project at the end, it's gonna end up in something really good for everyone, I think it makes students more willing to participate. And another thing, they were talking about like the results for the college, and students seeing the results of what they are working. If I'm like not next year, but doing different type of crops, vegetable, that makes that allows I don't know, like seeing some vegetables ready in September or others in May. So there are different seasons for these vegetables, and people see actually their results, if it's not at the beginning, at least at the end, or just as like flowers, I don't know, like seeing something tangible then, as we were saying yesterday. Yeah, they were my points, and sorry for my English if it's not really correct.
Really valuable, Sophia. Thank you so much, and just absolutely reiterating how important it is to involve students in the vision of this, as Katie's put in the chat. Magda, really I think to summarise what some of the points that came out of the breakout rooms. Kato, would you like to maybe summarise for our room, breakout room 1? Because you had there were some really nice ideas emerging there, and it came from a quite a detailed conversation about what needs to happen to move forward.
Sure. We talked about the disconnect between the curriculum and what was called the hidden curriculum, and also how because students don't see maybe change in sustainability, because we mainly talked about sustainability. We went in on SUSCO, which is the Sustainability Council, and the involvement of students mainly in how we want to build momentum. And we first explored why there were so little students, maybe that were part of that movement. And we concluded that it might be because students are discouraged because they don't see the actual change. They don't see an outcome or product from the work that they're putting in. And because there's disconnect to what is taught and what is like taught in the curriculum and what is taught in the sustainability curriculum, there might be a difference, which creates distrust in the system and discourages people. And we kind of moved on to brainstorming about how we could kind of involve students right from the start, and to like keep encouraging them, so showing that there is change. So maybe getting them to participate in the Valley, which looks amazing right now, like straight away, and getting them proactive from the start, and having already some small changes set up. So we have these changes to put in place to encourage them and to like support proactive ideas, and to have this platform where students can talk to people higher in the hierarchical system. I don't know. But yeah, that was basically what we discussed, I think. Please add to this if I missed something. So yeah.
Great. And I think that's, in terms of what Katie asked us to explore, I think that really It's about what is essential to the student experience. So as well as the project being essential to the fabric of the college and the food economy within it, it's about putting that in the frame of maybe student experience as well, which I think Cato has articulated really well. Breakout room 2. Anybody like feedback from there?
Who's going to go in? I don't want to waffle on and bore you all. Somebody else do it.
So I think we also, just echoing Cato's point, where thinking about how the students can get sort of takeaways. I know that sort of cuts against a bit about what Graham was saying about the sort of having a long-term vision, but I think Mia raised this idea that we should be thinking about how to have the students sort of feel a direct benefit, and I think Sam talked about how we can engage with the staff more and sort of cultivate their enthusiasm and have that feed it into the students more, which for me at least speaks to this need to have that vision in the first place, which, and with that vision every staff member can sort of interpret it in their own way, in their own fields and competencies, and use the Valley as a resource and teaching aid, and in different ways. Katie, what did I miss out?
I think also Bob made a really interesting point about things being often valued only through what they produce rather than for the thing itself. And he gave it, the example of the soil, just the nurturing that and keeping that healthy, is an end in itself. And I think that's quite an important point, which is, I think throughout the whole discussion, there was something about, again, it's pretty obvious really when you think about it, but this need for balance. So on the one hand, students and everybody needs to see a cycle, needs to see production, and needs to understand their place in that and see the full circle. But there's also a place for acknowledging that you're in a much larger circle that you'll never see the end of, and it's work for the sake of a greater good, and it's being part of a cog. And I think that one of the things that has sort of struck me is that as a sort of learning place and as a curriculum, there is a role I feel for the curriculum itself to be guiding people's interest as well. I think when people start their learning journey, and we're just sort of saying, what are you interested in doing? It's very likely that people won't be remotely interested in gardening. But there is a role to play about sort of actively guiding, and people, of course, within that will have different interests, different passions that they will be drawn to more than other things. But I think that the role of the curriculum is to open eyes and sort of transmit a passion that is infectious. And I feel like that has to be possible.
I wonder if it's also finding the story. Sorry.
No, please do. Please go on.
I was just going to say, finding the sort of story, the context, thinking about sort of like where farming came from, and sort of taking ourselves back to that time, and involving music as well. So I guess, sorry, little just thing there to say.
Absolutely.
You're right. I definitely echo that. It's about building an expectation and building up a sense of ground. That's what culture is made of, isn't it? It's a common sense of what we value and what's important to us, and and it's building on what students are interested in, but building on it meaningfully and allowing that momentum to build and develop. And I think that's what we've got a lot of, and we've heard a lot of today. I mean, I think for me, there's two words that are sticking out. One is the idea of integrating what we're talking about into different aspects of college life more meaningfully. And the second thing is alignment, and how we get the values right in the rest of the college so that it supports the kind of values we're talking about within the Valley, and having a critical conversation about what those values are and what that means in terms of action. And, you know, maybe those things we can flesh out tomorrow, because tomorrow's session is intended to build on what we've done today and then put some practical actions, strategies, recommendations, firm ideas together that that can be taken forward. And our group in a breakout room talked about ways of doing that. How do we build up momentum, and how do we, in the great competing interests that we have, you know, how do we put this agenda central to Peter and maybe Alan Fleming's agenda? And maybe the students can have a central role in that, because I think where students seize an idea and articulate it as skillfully as we know they're able to, then that can be a really good catalyst for change around here. So maybe we can throw that into the discussions tomorrow to build on what we've what's been said today. I hope everyone can make it tomorrow. We're meeting at what time, Magda? Tomorrow, 4 o'clock?
So it will be this Saturday at 4 British time.
Sorry, Saturday, isn't it? We've got storytelling tomorrow. Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for those really valuable insights. It's really building, I think, into some really substantial approaches to be distilled tomorrow. Before we go though, Jack, would you like to put a shout out for the other part of the project week that's kicking off tomorrow, and just as people might want to be involved in that as well?
Yeah, sure. So we are going. The idea sprang up that that there's a great resource in the experience of alumni in helping the college sort of tell the story of itself, help sort of find the values that have inspired former students and inspire current students, and to really tell the story. So we are going to be having having students lead a series of interviews with different alum, exploring, you know, values, experiences, and subsequent careers that the college inspired. Also talking about some of the challenges and difficulties of being a student, and seeing those sort of where the commonalities exist. So tomorrow we are bringing together the student filmmakers, who are all broken up into different director-producer teams with the guidance of 2 great alum who are documentary filmmakers. And we're going to be workshopping, interviewing a pair of alums who have, you know, they've got really fascinating stories, and I can't wait to see what's going to arise from the students sort of probing their experiences, and, you know, the stories that will emerge, and, you know, how we as a community, you know, value the past, think about the past, how we shouldn't wear rose-tinted spectacles, but also, you know, how we should be drawing, you know, inspiration from and values from history. I think that's why it's been so lovely to have Bob on the call today, and just to feel connected with that sort of the history of the Valley, and to hear about Graham's experience over the past 10 years. So if you're an alum, if you're a student, it would be great to have you join and help us discover how to tell stories. The output will hopefully be a series of small sort of 2-3 minute documentaries focused on each decade of the college, and I think those will be like little videos to share, and I think we'll try and put them all together into a sort of telling of of the college history through video and images. And I've got one specific request, is that we're looking for any video footage that alums might have. We've got a whole bunch of guys from the 70s and the 80s who are unpacking their VHS tapes and finding ways to digitize them. So I think we should have hopefully some really great material that's going to sort of capture the spirit of the place over time. So if anyone's got any videos, anyone wants to come and volunteer and to be interviewed, come tomorrow.
Wonderful, great. Katie, do you want to finish off?
Yeah, no, I think it's just been really useful today. Thanks everyone for joining. As I said, the session on Saturday will be very much more focused on. Sorry, my children have just decided to join in. That session will be very much more focused on action and you know, how do we go from here in a very practical sense. Sorry, slightly distracted. But yeah, thank you for joining, everybody. That was really useful.